So I wanted to say welcome to all of you. So it's been an incredible, extraordinary, and in many cases, a challenging time in our journey towards Krishna. This year has been perhaps one of the most extraordinary. And what we wanted to explore in this first session are three specific statements. And these are statements on community, which are 64 principles of community, which were given by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a great acharya in our movement and the guru of our own founder acharya, Srila Prabhupada. To set the context, this year we've had so many different challenges as a global community. And we are still, as a global community, reeling from and trying to come to terms with a new state of reality, a new way of understanding the world, and a new way of orienting ourselves in this particular world. How we orientate ourselves in this world is really crucial, because in our journey of Krishna consciousness, we do not immediately land with both feet on the transcendental platform. When we come to Krishna consciousness, one of the biggest misconceptions that we have is that because I've just started this process, therefore I'm completely transcendental. In the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada is actually explaining this point at the beginning of the 14th chapter, where he talks about the modes of material nature, and he talks about how the modes work, how they act, how they bind. He talks about how they liberate also. And so for many of us, that realization that while we are aiming for transcendence, we are standing on the material platform. We're aiming for the transcendental platform, but we're still having to negotiate and maneuver the world as it is. There are many things that our teachings explain about this process. There are many gems, many empowering verses and statements that the teachings of Krishna consciousness give us. And one of the most exciting things that we can do in 2020 and beyond is to really develop a certain powerful orientation in Krishna consciousness. And that orientation is the orientation of application. In one sense, we have so many teachings. We have the Srimad Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Upadeshamrita. There are so many literatures given by our acharyas. And as part of the process given by Prabhupada in all of our centers, literally every day, some discourse on the teachings are given. So it is very easy to think that I am drinking in the philosophy. I am fully embracing the philosophy. But that perception in many cases would be an illusion. Many of us hear the philosophy, but there's often a blind spot. And that blind spot is often the movement from inspiration to how we can take this inspiration and how we can apply this practically in our everyday lives. This is not just an issue that we face as a spiritual community. In the early days of ISKCON, I'm not sure if they use this phrase too much now, and many of you will have heard this phrase. Sometimes we'll say that a particular devotee is spaced out. And it's a very interesting statement, actually, because it means a lot more than you would consider on the surface. we have two things. We have our feet, and the aspiration there is to have our feet on the ground. What does that mean? It is a metaphor for being practical. At the same time, we want our consciousness to be in the transcendental realm. And what we're trying to do as devotees is something very, very interesting. We sit literally as a bridge between the pure state, the higher realms, and this material world. And one of the ways in which we can define our mission, Nam Sankirtana Praya Yajanti Husimodashaha. One of the ways in which we can define this Sankirtan Yagya that has been given to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself is the act of being a conduit. We're trying to be a recipient of the mercy of the Acharyas, the mercy of the spiritual world, the mercy of Sri Sri Radha Shamasundar. But we're trying to be a recipient of that mercy so we can bring that mercy down to this particular material world, to make it as accessible as possible for two groups of people. Two groups of people. One group is what we call the living entities of the world, those who are not practicing Krishna consciousness. We try to take the teachings and make it as accessible to them as possible. There was an exchange between Srila Prabhupada and His Holiness Tamal Krishnaraj. I believe it was a letter. And Tamal Krishnaraj had been doing the Radha Damodar bus party. They'd been going around making devotees, holding festivals, doing kirtan, book distribution. And Prabhupada had communicated with Tamal Krishnaraj, and he said that the thing I like about what you're doing is that you've understood one thing. And that is that in Kali Yuga, people will not come to the temple, they will not come to Krishna. So we have to come to them. So the idea is that we are acting as a bridge between the material and the spiritual. While we are elevating ourselves closer and closer to that transcendental platform, we are connecting with their mercy, and we are making their mercy accessible to the living entities in the world. So that is one group that we are facilitating. But that facilitation is also based upon our own ability to be grounded recipients of that mercy ourselves. Perhaps more so than many other years, 2020 has been a test of how deeply and how internally we are also able to be completely grounded, practically grounded in these teachings and in their application while we are in this world. And this is a theme that will continue to play out into our lives. There are some devotees who are very, very practical, but who are sometimes divorced from the higher aspiration. So both feel are in the material world, and their vision is in the material world. There are some devotees, they are very idealistic. Their vision, their ideology is all around the ideals of spiritual practice. But they may find that that ideal gets shaken, gets disturbed, gets distracted when they meet the realities of material existence. We still have to maintain our bodies in some way, shape, or form. We still have to, especially if we're not full-time living in temple, we have to pay the bills. We have to maintain ourselves and our situation, and we may have responsibility for other living entities in our family that we also have responsibilities too. So sometimes we have a vision of the ideal, and we are disturbed by the practical realities. but both have a role to play in Krishna consciousness. And one of the fundamental things that this material world does is it reminds us constantly that this place is not our home. So this brings us to the first statement that we're going to read from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he created these 64 principles of community to really help the institution, the Gaudiya Math, to really understand how the dealings and how the interactions should be. And the more that we understand this, the more that we dive into this, the more that we embody these teachings, the more extraordinary and the more powerful our spiritual lives and our spiritual progress will be. So I'm going to read you a few of the principles. Today I think we'll try and get through 3 of the principles. And we're going to explore their significance and their application for us practically. And this is a theme that we're going to be trying to draw upon throughout the next few mornings. The practical application of spiritual life and what it does for us. How it transforms us and how it allows us to navigate even this material world while we go on this journey, the journey of the Jiva. While we move on this journey and we become fully situated with both feet, ultimately, both feet in the spiritual world. And these teachings are always significant because one of the extraordinary blessings that we've all been given in our lives is that our teachings are coming from pure devotees. We know that there are different classes of devotees. In the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada talks about the Kripa Siddha, who is receiving mercy, and by that receptivity to the mercy, they are able to progress. Prabhupada speaks about Sadhana Siddha, someone who, through the careful application of the teachings, has perfected their spiritual practice, come through all the different levels, and therefore come to the stage of prema. And Prabhupada also speaks of his own class, Nitya Siddhas, those who are eternally liberated associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because they are eternally liberated, they are always fully connected to that same Supreme Lord. Because they have come from the spiritual world, they understand exactly, to the fine detail, what is required in order to get back from where we are here to the spiritual world. And because of their deep connection, even what they say off the cuff is intuitively guided by their prema, is intuitively guided by their constant, unending, intense, loving affair with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, being in that class of devotee, we can understand that everything he is given in his 64 principles of community, if only we can tune into this and really take this translation from hearing the teachings to applying the teachings, the more that we can do this in our lives, the more extraordinary our spiritual life will be. And I'll be honest, this is a dynamic that I've seen again and again in the lives of many successful devotees. The days of being idealistic are gone. We have to truly become transcendental. And we have to literally bring the spiritual world to this plane through our own application. Okay, so we're going to read this statement. So this is principle number 29 of the 64 principles of community by Bhaktisiddhanta. He says, this material world, which is averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is an examination hall. Now I want you to pause for a moment and let's just do a moment of manana. Just reflect on what's being said. This material world, which is averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is an examination hall. It's a place of learning. It's a place where we have to take a test. So just take a moment, meditate, and allow this understanding to sink in. So, let's be honest. Many of us probably did not like exams. For many of us, examination was a time of stress. For many of us, we may have had to try to get a lot done, a lot learned in a short space of time just before the exam was coming. I remember when I was at university. So I was studying, my undergraduate degree was in philosophy and economics. And I came to my final year and the exams were coming. And the year before, I had come to Krishna consciousness. And it was so blissful. Because it was so blissful, and because of my being so neophyte, I didn't really pay so much attention to my studies. I did something, but I was entering into this amazing new world. And I remember, as I was coming to exams in my final year, I remember thinking, oh no, I've got a lot that I need to learn. And I had to start to really try to cram so much understanding and so on. And I remember being in our philosophy, we had a common room where the students would come together. And in that common room, they would also give you different handouts. They would give you information about different philosophers that you could use to revise. And I remember I was in the line to get some of these different documents. And I was thinking, oh no, I've left it so late. And I've got to now cram all of my, my learning in order to be at the right level for my exam. And as I was in the line, in my mind, I was praying to Krishna. It's like, oh, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna, get all this done? And I had an interesting experience. In the line, there was someone turned around and looked at me, and they said to me, you can't expect miracles all the time. They actually told me that. It was just a complete stranger, just turned and looked at me and said, you can't expect miracles all the time. And I remember thinking, yeah, this is the point. If I'm to do well in any exam, if I'm to do well in any situation, it actually requires that I really take the lesson to heart and I really work on that basis. I really work on the basis that there is an exam. And actually, the day you start the process of education, I should begin. I realized my mistake was the day I started the process of education, I should have begun with the end in mind. I'm giving a seminar, I think it's January the 8th, on goal setting. So something for the new year and how we can set goals and how we can focus on what we're meant to be achieving and so on. And as I was researching for this, it really hit me. It really hit me that one of the most powerful things that all of us can do in our journey in Krishna consciousness is really to begin with the end in mind. So this statement by Bhaktisiddhanta, the idea that we are living in an examination hall, is a sutra. Right? So what is a sutra? You have some statement. These statements are very powerful. Why are they powerful? Because they are full of condensed wisdom. And just like when you have something that's concentrated, you can unpack it, you can unravel it, and you can use it as a compass, as literally a lens. So some of us, we wear glasses, you can put the glasses on and then you look around and it gives you insight into literally everything. Everything. So this statement is a sutra, and this idea of beginning with the end in mind is really powerful for us as devotees. Why? Why is it so powerful? It is because if I don't have a purpose and a goal, then actually everything around me becomes more difficult. If I don't have a purpose and a goal, if I do not know where I'm going, then we as devotees, we can be in Krishna consciousness for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and we may sometimes wake up and look in the mirror and consider, why have I made so little progress? Why have I been practicing for so long, but feel that I've progressed so little? This 2020, as we said, was an extraordinary year because we were really brought to bear with the idea that life is really full of surprises. For the vast majority of us, if you'd said that actually, don't worry, just let you know that at the beginning of the year, soon after we hit around February, literally the whole world will go into lockdown. People will be queuing up to go to the supermarket, to the stores, to buy lots of goods because they may not be sure whether they'll be able to access those stores again. People that we know, people that we hold very dear, even ourselves, may be inflicted with a disease. And some of the people who are inflicted with this disease, this virus, will pass away like that. Not only will they pass away, but the entire world economy will be affected. And literally millions of people will lose their jobs. This is coming. If we'd been told that at the beginning of the year, I don't know about you, but I don't really believe that I would have taken it seriously. I don't think I would have taken it seriously. I would have thought maybe this person's just been watching a few too many movies. But this is where we are. And so 2020 has really shown us that in life, it would not be considered unrealistic to expect the unexpected. In other words, the test may come at any time. At any time. We don't know when we're going to be tested. We don't know how we're going to be tested. But this has a really important implication. I was reflecting in my own life, and I came to realize, I came to understand more about certain blind spots. What I'd seen when I was reflecting this year in particular, I saw that there were weaknesses that I was aware of. Okay, some things I was aware of. Okay, I don't do this so well. I could improve in this particular area. But I also saw two other things. I saw that there were some weaknesses that I was unaware of, which was like a blind spot. So I wasn't fully conscious that this is an area that you could improve on. And that was one thing. But something which was even more powerful and profound happened. I started to see, yes, Bhuta Bhavana, there are some weaknesses that you're not aware of, and they're coming into consciousness, they're coming into view. But I also saw that there are some weaknesses that I was aware of, but I was putting off really doing something about them. And as I started to dig into this, I started to see why. I saw, yes, Bhuta Bhavana, there's a lack of what we call emergency consciousness. So sometimes we know that the issue is there, but we think that we have forever. So therefore, the issue blips on the radar. Okay, the issue is there. We have time, I'll do it tomorrow. We may forget. Later on, the issue blips on the radar again. Here it is. Oh, yeah, I know that. I'm aware that I have this issue. I'm aware that I need to improve in this area. I'm aware, I'm okay. And then, at a particular point in time, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, you're thrown the exam. At that point, unexpectedly, the issue that we have been aware of, but did not give sufficient attention to, Now we have the exam. Now the test comes into our life. And that test can do a number of things. For some, it can cause us to feel stressed, to feel that life is unfair. It can cause us to even question, why is Christian doing this to me? I'm such a good devotee. Well, why is he giving me this test? But for some of us, if we're really honest and if we look into our hearts, we can see, okay, you know what? Krishna did tell me that this was there. He did show me that this was something that I needed to work on. He gave me the heads up. He gave me the early warning, but I did not sufficiently give attention to this area. There's a system for time management. And in the system for time management, they talk about 4 quadrants, which are 4 areas, and they are 4 ways that people deal with tasks and time. So you had one group of people, and they spend their time doing things which are not important and not urgent. Okay, so not important and not urgent. So they're really spending all their time in an area which is not really taking them forward in life. You could consider that that area is symptomatic of the mode of ignorance. I've got limited time. Time is extremely precious. But I spend all my time doing things which are not important and they're not urgent. Those are the people, when we are in that consciousness, we can wake up and really feel, you know, well, I've wasted so much time. Then there are other people who spend time doing things which are not important but urgent. So it may be things which are other people's concerns. Can you get this done for me last minute? I just need this done. It's not actually important, but the person's pulling pressure and our energy goes there. There are some people who spend time doing things which are not urgent, but they are important. This is the best place to be in. This is the best place to be in. I'd like you to do a little reflective exercise. Think about these areas. Time spent doing things which are unimportant and not urgent. That's one area. Time spent doing things which are urgent, but they're not actually important. They're not moving us forward. There's also time spent doing things which are not important. Let's see, let's go back. So we've got not important, not urgent. That's one area. We've got important, sorry, we've got not important but urgent. Okay, we've got not urgent. So the deadline is not here, but it is important. That space is a mode of goodness. And the last one, we've got urgent and important. Okay, that's when it's like an emergency. You got to do this. It's really important and it's now urgent because you didn't take care of it before. So we live our lives in these 4 areas. Try and do an exercise to reflect. Where do you spend most of your time? This statement by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is really explaining to us that our time is precious and we have to learn. We need to learn. And the amazing thing is we each have different lessons to learn. We know if we're honest, if we step back from the mode of passion and we look at our lives, look at our consciousness, look at our hearts, we know if we're honest where we need to pay attention. And we are only as strong as our weakest link. We're only as strong as the area in which we are weak. So think about that. You have a chain and it's made of these different circles, okay? And they're all connected to each other and you're testing it. And at each circle, you find the circle is really sturdy, except one link, one circle in the chain, you notice it's a little bit weak. So what that means is when I pull the chain, it's that one area of weakness that will break the entire chain. that one area of weakness which will break the entire chain. And if we're honest, we know where the weakness is. Perhaps in 2020, some of our inner weaknesses, which we may have forgotten, may have ignored, may have buried, may have looked away from, maybe for some of us, this year, we've been forced to really pay attention to this. And this is something that's happening in our spiritual communities. It is happening in the global world community. But it is one thing to see that there's an area that needs attention. And it is another thing to actually make the journey to transform. So why do we want to make that journey? What can motivate us to make that journey? It is simply this. What happens when you pass a test? There's many different experiences people have. Many of us, when we pass a test, we feel some relief. Thank God I've done the exam, I can get out, I can leave. But there's something more. There's something more. I know in my own experience, and many of us can relate, when I go for an exam and I know I've studied hard for this exam, I know I did research, I spoke to my professors, my teachers, I spoke to them, I tried to find out what exams could be coming up. I really rolled my sleeves up. I did something difficult. I looked at myself, I gave myself a strong, hard look in the mirror, and I said, what do you really need to work on? Bhuta Bhavana, look in the mirror. Where is the weakness that you really need to work on? It's often a painful thing to do this. It's often a painful thing to look at ourselves naked. And I don't mean physically naked. I mean honest, authentic, objectively, and see, where is it that we are weak? Where is it that we will fail the test? It's often difficult to do that, but it's incredibly rewarding. Because every time we pass a test, what happens? Like when you go to college and you pass the test, then you can go to university. You can do your undergraduate degree. When you pass your degree at university, then you can go on and do your master's degree. When you pass the master's degree at university, then you can go on and do a doctorate or a PhD. What is it that's qualifying us to come to a higher level? It is simply our ability to pass the test. So when we meet different challenges, difficulties, circumstances, and they can be difficult people or difficult situations, especially when we get disturbed, when we feel negative about it, it's very powerful if we can ask ourselves a question: what is it that this situation or this individual is teaching me? And the most powerful thing that we can do in our lives, which is a fuel of motivation that we often forget, the most powerful thing that we can do in Krishna consciousness is progress. Clinical psychologists have done studies on this, and they have found that it's not the achievement of a goal that elicits positive emotions so much. That may bring, it can bring something, but they found that the thing that really motivates a person, the thing that really triggers, on a repeated basis, triggers positive emotions in an individual, and as devotees, it completely applies to us. The thing that most triggers positive emotions is the sense that we are making progress. That is the factor that really strengthens positive emotions. It releases different positive hormones in the body. People often talk about endorphins. And what happens is the more that we feel good, the more that we actually become even more determined and more motivated. There's a wonderful statement that I came across recently, and it really speaks to this. And I shared this with those people who I'm mentoring. It was just very simple. And to be honest, when I saw it, I thought, wow, it was such a clever statement. And I thought, I wish I had thought of that. And it was just 4 sentences. The sentences were as follows. Hard choices, full stop. Easy life, full stop. Easy choices, full stop. Hard life, full stop. The idea being that if we're prepared to look at what we need to look at, even though it's a bit tricky, even though it's a bit difficult, even though it's not easy, if we're prepared to look at what we really should be paying attention to, if we're prepared to drink the poison, what is it Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita? Mode of goodness begins like poison, but in the long term is nectar. If we're prepared to face facts about ourselves, even uncomfortable truths, and then work on it, build that into our day-to-day schedule, work on it bit by bit. It doesn't have to be like, we're not expecting to transform ourselves, but bit by bit. If we're able to do that every day, even the biggest weakness will become the catalyst for our greatest success. And that is one of the key lessons of 2020. Before I came to Krishna consciousness, I was into like metaphysics, which is basically just subtle sciences, understanding how the subtle energy works. And one of the things I used to do was I used to use some like metaphysical understanding to understand the nature of a particular year. Because every particular year has a certain vibration and it has certain universal lessons that it will offer humanity. So when I looked at this 2020, as the year unfolded, it became very clear some of the key lessons. This 2020 was all around the lessons of looking at our foundations, looking at the platform upon which we are standing, and also coming to terms with truth, with fundamental truths about reality. So those people who had made that investment to really be honest with themselves, honest about themselves, honest about their situation, and honest about the very nature of reality in this material world. You will find for those people who are deeply imbibed that lesson, deeply honest, deeply truthful, they would have had an easier time navigating 2020 because their expectations of reality would have been perfectly aligned with the realities of the material world itself. And for many of us whose expectations were out of tune with how the material energy really works, this would have been more of a struggle, more of a difficulty, because you can't change reality, right? We can't overcome reality. We can only accept reality. And of course, the highest reality is Jiva Supoi Krishna Nitya Das. So to the extent that we've been able to go deeper, what happens? To that extent, when the tests come, then we really get to see, Krishna really shows us, this is the degree to which you have imbibed the lesson. Well done. Or this is the degree to which you've imbibed the lesson. There is more to learn. We have to become more, we have to develop more mastery in this particular area of life. And this plays out throughout all of our existence. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, we're literally in an examination room. So life is what? Life is the understanding that I'm a student. And pure devotee is what? Pure devotee is perfect student. Perfect student. Pure devotee means one who is eager to learn all the time. One who is ready to learn all the time. And how do we learn? The beginning of all knowledge is humility. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, text number 8, Krishna will list all those elements that constitute knowledge. And the first element that he gives in that list is humility. Why? There's an interesting story about one famous school where they teach music, and it's a very, very high class school. So people who get to go, they're usually from very elite backgrounds. And when they come to the school, when they're interviewed for the school, they're asked various questions. You know, there's an exchange to get to know them. And one of the questions is, have you ever done any learning in terms of music? Right? So the majority of students will say yes. You know, I've done this, I've done that, I've had a teacher, I've learned so much, etc. And the students, there's two classes therefore of students. One group of students who will say, no, I've never learned this before, I'm new to this. Another group of students will say, yes, I've done this before, I've had some learning, etc. So those students who are completely fresh in this area, in this discipline, they are given one particular fee, a certain price that they have to pay in order to learn, in order to be admitted to the school to learn music. The other group of students who have had prior learning, they are charged more in order to come into the school. And the reason for this is very interesting. The reason being that they're told, actually, because you've already have some behaviors, habits in relation to this, and there's a specific way that we're meant to teach you, we're charging you more because we have to do more teaching. The first teaching is to help you to unlearn all the things that you've learned prior, which go against the system that we're trying to teach. And then once you've emptied here sufficiently, then we can actually really give you a full and thorough learning. So those who are open, receptive, and clear, they have one price. Those who already think, I know so much already, they're charged more. And this is a metaphor for our lives as well. One of the most eye-opening things that I've seen in spiritual life is how many of us as devotees, myself included, how many of us have misconceptions about Krishna consciousness that we play out, that plays out into our day-to-day lives in spiritual life. How many of us have ideas which are just coming from our own sentiment, our own expectations, our own speculation, which are different from the teachings. And then when those ideas hit obstacles, then we become bewildered. We may become depressed. We may even go to thinking, why is Krishna making it so hard for me? I'm such a good devotee. So it is often the case that for many of us, we're meant to actually explore and release, to explore, where do these ideas come from? Some of the things that I assume about myself, some of the things that I assume about devotees, some of the things that I assume about Krishna consciousness, are these things true? This examination hall that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is speaking about, the examination hall exists outside of us, and the examination hall is meant to exist within us too. Krishna consciousness, if it's done properly, is also meant to be a life of examination and introspection, along with execution. I repeat, a life of examination, introspection, and execution. And there's a link between the two. The more that I know myself, the more that I understand myself, the more that I'm honest with myself, the more expertly I can navigate the process or the journey back home, back to Godhead. And the more expertly I can navigate my community, my association, my world. So we want you to really think about this. One question only. What is it about myself that I really know I need to work on? One thing. What is the most important thing? And we want to encourage you, ask yourself, how am I going to make that journey today? Ladies and gentlemen, please understand that we've never had time. People say we don't have time. That's wrong. We've never had time. What is time? Time means how the body deteriorates. That is what time is actually. Time is actually how the material energy is deteriorating. So just like you have a bucket and the water is leaking from the bucket, time is passing us. So the only time we have is now. And the only progress we have is how we use now, how we invest now for transcendence. That is success. Now, how that journey is achieved is this next verse that I'm going to read. And this is principle number 44. How success is achieved, or a key part of success. Association. This is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, principle number 44. Association is the principle, and just get the words here. It's just so beautiful. And when we look at this with attention, so much more comes out. Bhaktisiddhanta says, association is the principal impetus in human life to serve Sri Hari. I'll repeat this first sentence because it's so powerful. Association is the principle, that means the number one impetus, that means motivation in human life to serve Sri Hari. Due to the association of non-devotees, one gets material prosperity. Due to the association of devotees, the spirit soul gradually becomes absorbed in serving Sri Hari. This is the greatest shelter for a human being. Never become averse to that. So again, it's a sutra. So what does it mean? See, first of all, our spiritual lives are harder or easier by the association we keep. This is so important. Sometimes we may think, you know what, spiritual life is challenging, it's difficult, I've hit this challenge, I've hit that challenge. Every single one of us have to have tests. When I was studying at university, actually, let's go back. When I was studying at college, I found that when I did the very best in my studies, I was trying to do this, and this is something you can do. I was trying to look at times in my life when I was successful. And I tried to think, okay, when things have gone really well, Bhuta Bhavana, stop and think, when you've done really well, let's explore. Let's explore you, meaning let's explore your consciousness, and let's explore your situation. When things have gone well in your life, and we can say when things have gone well in our spiritual life, what's been going on? There's a saying that they have in the material world that success leaves clues. Okay, I repeat this: success leaves clues. Right? That's a whole seminar in itself. So when we're doing well, in spiritual life, there are clues. There are clues inside, there are clues outside. When I did this examination, I saw exactly what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking about, that one of the biggest clues was not just association. It wasn't just association. It was specifically the type of association and the type, or rather, the type of association and the type of relationship I had with that association. It's not just about who we're associating with. It's also how we are associating. I really saw, Krishna made it so, it was vivid. He showed me two things. He showed me that the association I kept had a huge impact on how I was able to move forward. So it was the association, it was how I was associating, it was what it was doing for me, doing to me. But just a few days ago, as I was reflecting on this, I was reflecting because I was thinking of different statements, just different wise sayings that we could share with people. But he showed me there was two things. And this was really interesting because it's something that plays out throughout our entire spiritual life. He showed me two things. He showed me that there's poverty and nivriti. Poverty means those things which are to be done. So by this, when we talk about association, he showed me that there were certain positive types of association I was deliberately having, right? So the people I moved deliberately, intentionally, positively to associate with. What he showed me also was the opposite. He showed me how the success was also deeply related to how I was dealing with negative individuals in my life space. That was these two things. He showed me it wasn't just enough that we had positive association and that we related offenselessly, we related sincerely, humbly with that positive association. He showed me that was just one part of the equation. But he showed me also that it was also how we dealt with those people who may have been a little bit more negative, a little bit more, let's say, materialistic. And it was the two ingredients coming together that really drove us forward in our spiritual life. And it was a major lesson for me. And I started to look and I started to see that this was something that was playing out in literally every single devotee's life. Every single devotee's life. And there was no exception. It was so powerful that, and I put it this way to you. I saw that I am the devotees who I associated with in the past. I saw that close, constant association with certain devotees, what to speak of the devotees in the scriptures, because that's also another type of association. The devotees who we hear class from, that's also another type of association. All of those together made me who I am. And I also realized, and this will play out every moment of every day in everyone's life until we leave this body. I also realized even more excitement. And that is, I also realized that I realized that I am becoming the devotees who I associate with now. I repeat, I realized that I am those who I have associated with in the past. And even more so, I realized that I am becoming those devotees that I am associating with in the present. So people in the world, they'll look to different systems for predicting their future. If you want to predict your future, all you need to do is look at who you associate with. That is the number one predictor of the future. And the most glorious thing, but also the most scary thing, is that we have the opportunity to associate with the most exalted personalities. They are there every single day, every single moment of every single day in the pages of the Bhagavatam, in the pages of literally every single book given by Prabhupada, every single lecture given by Prabhupada, and those devotees who are intimate associates of Prabhupada. In 2020, I realized that what Krishna was doing is he was giving every single one of us the tools to decide, I'm going to put your future in your hands. I'm going to put your future in your own hands by giving you conscious awareness of the quality of your association. You choose your association, you choose your future. And that is a gift. That is a gift that we in our communities have often not understood the significance of. Now, this brings up a question. It brings up a serious question. It says here that due to the association of non-devotees, one gets material prosperity. Due to the association of devotees, the spirit soul gradually becomes absorbed in serving Sri Hari. What is that absorption? That absorption is spiritual ecstasy. Everything becomes difficult when we feel down. Everything becomes easy when we feel blissful. Why? Why? Everything becomes easy when you feel blissful because you actually become stronger, fearless, and you lose all insecurity by the bliss. Sounds strange, right? You've probably never heard that in a class. What do you mean you lose all insecurity by the bliss? I've been having this really interesting communication with some devotee friends of ours, and we're going to do a seminar on this in the future. What I saw was that there are so many of us as devotees, we have issues with self-esteem. And I got a glimpse of where that was coming from. What happens is the following. When my sense of self-worth is dependent upon factors outside of my control, it causes me to feel insecure and fearful. Very simple. Because if I'm dependent for my own sense of self-value, if I'm dependent upon what other people do, then my unconscious knows that what if they don't value you? What if they don't praise you? What if they don't validate you? You will be down. So I'm always in this dependent space in relation to others. I'm always in this dependent space. Now, it does not mean that we do not appreciate the love, the care, the encouragement of devotees. No, not at all. That love is a natural part of our loving exchange. But what we're talking about here is when I'm overly dependent in a very material way. So now I'm doing things not as a pure expression of service. I'm doing things just to get approval. And what's not being spoken about is that because I'm so desperate for approval, it now means I don't have integrity. Rather than doing what is right, I'll just do what's going to get a round of applause. So now I'm attached to name, fame, distinction, adoration, profit, prestige. And even if I'm externally successful, I'm still dependent. I'm still insecure. Because what will happen is, as successful as I am, at some point in the future, someone will be more successful. And then someone else will be even more successful externally. And what happens then? Then I'm crushed. So what was revealed to me, very interesting, was that the praise and blame that Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita are literally two sides of the same coin. I did an experiment. I did a thought experiment and an observation. I saw that the devotees, every single devotee, without fail, every single person who was overly dependent upon other people for approval and for appreciation, I saw that directly to the extent that they're dependent, not that they just appreciate it, but they're needy in this area. I saw that to the extent that they were needy, that they were dependent upon the appreciation and the praise and the round of applause and the recognition and the fame from others. I saw that to that extent, that same devotee, when they were criticized or blamed, which was inevitable, because when you're successful, some people will be envious. I saw that to the extent that they were dependent upon appreciation, to exactly that same extent, when they were criticized or blamed, it crushed them. And I thought, wow, practical application. I then, because I never understood it in that same way before, but I then looked at the statements of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita with different eyes. And I saw, wow, this is why Krishna is saying, do not be attached to praise, because as much as it's all about the round of applause, to that same extent, you'll be destroyed by the criticism, which is inevitable in the material world. Well, I saw that what Krishna was doing out of his deep love and deep compassion for all of his devotees was giving us a chance, an opportunity to get off the roller coaster, which was on its way to destruction. And this ability had a lot to do with the association. Because I saw that the association was not only determining who we were, but it was determining whether or not we really understood who Krishna is and what Krishna consciousness is. I saw that when devotees were just around people who were all about the externals, very quickly they became external. And what do we call external? Prakrita Bhakta. external devotees. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his writing, he talks about different types of disciple. He talks about the Bahimukya Shishya and the Antarmukya Shishya. Sanskrit is such a beautiful language because when we talk about, for example, the words, we can immediately understand things. Antaranga Shakti means Krishna's internal potency. Antaranga Shakti. Bahiranga Shakti is Krishna's external energy. So when we hear the words Bahir Mukhya Shishya, that means external facing devotee. Bahir, Mukhya, face, Bahir, external facing devotee. So for such an individual, it's all about the externals. Now, we're not saying that doing things in the world is wrong. We're not saying that. We said this at the beginning, because so often we get it confused. We think it's either one or the other. No, it's meant to be both. But it's meant to be, we have our feet on the ground while we are attuned to transcendence. Why? Because we want to bring that transcendence and make it accessible for everyone. So it's not that we ignore the external world. No, the external world is our examination hall, and it's also our service arena. But if we're just stuck on the externals and we're dependent upon the approval of others, you at some point, dependent upon how good our karma is, we will be stuck. And even while we're making that journey, we will always have this fear and insecurity. You see sometimes devotees who are very good externally, they have this fear and insecurity. Someone's going to come up. Someone's also going to be as good externally. So you see this is where our competition comes from in our communities. I need to keep this person down before they come up. Because as long as I'm number one, I feel a bit good about myself. So if they become number one, I feel threatened. And it destroys the spirit of cooperation and collaboration. It's a trap of the material energy. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is giving us power by this application of this one point. And we've heard it many times in scripture, which is the danger. The danger when we hear so much but apply so little is we become desensitized. So you hear it again, it just becomes another hearing, but the significance, the power and the beauty of what's being said, the brilliance of the teachings, it does not become immediately apparent. So again, association is the principal impetus in human life to serve Sri Hari. It means that the better our association, the stronger and more blissful our spiritual journey. And what it also means is it transforms the very nature of our challenges. There are some devotees who've been wise. They've been very wise, and it's probably some mercy from their previous life's activities and pure devotees giving them blessings. What they've done is they've been very conscious of who they associate with and how they associate. Now, by this, I don't mean that we only associate with good devotees. We can give association even without taking association if we strengthen ourselves and strengthen our compassion. That's what we're meant to do. The formula is twofold: strengthen self, strengthen compassion. And the two things are an ecosystem, they link. If I strengthen myself and give that superior strength to others, which is compassion, then I will get more back in return. So it's an ecosystem that just spirals up. So I saw the devotees who had that good association. What were they able to do? I was thinking, what was a special quality that they had through really quality association that other devotees didn't have? And I saw one thing that really blew my mind, to be honest. I saw that the thing that they had, and it's often an invisible factor, I saw that when they had really sincere, good association where they could be honest, they were able to develop real humility. Because they had people who were actually so loving and trustworthy and mature that they could be honest about their weaknesses. They could be honest about their failings. And they could be honest about it without those people insulting them, without those people rejecting them. You know, and without those people being sentimental. They didn't just say, oh, it's okay, you know, you're smoking, you know, cigarettes, it's all right. It wasn't that kind of relationship. They were able to be honest about themselves, good and bad. They were able to be honest about their successes and honest about their failures and have a real loving exchange. And what was interesting was that in doing so, they weren't ashamed of themselves. They weren't ashamed or embarrassed about who they were. And what that led to was authenticity in their dealings with other people, which made them naturally grow and prosper. They were able to literally shed issues. And it was all going on subtly because it wasn't obvious to the majority of devotees, because you wouldn't know the quality of their relationships unless, you know, they revealed it to you. But they were becoming, I saw over years, they became more authentic and secure, while others were sometimes, through bad association, leaning towards being more manipulative, more exploitative, more insecure. They were fearful about who they were. They were fearful about not getting their, you know, not solving, as Ayendra Prabhu says, their chapati problem, right? Not getting their material benefits from being a devotee. And over time, these two groups of devotees were moving in completely different directions. I also saw a connection between humility and love. That when we receive encouragement and we're deeply situated in our own, let's say, lack of qualification, our own humility, then when we receive the encouragement and the appreciation of devotees, it was experienced by us as a form of causeless love and mercy. And that love was so delicious. It was such a, it was like an elixir. It helped us to grow, to prosper, to be inspired, to be determined, to be strong. It was as if we were becoming smaller and smaller. Krishna was becoming bigger and bigger in our lives, and the love was just magnifying. We were experiencing an abundance of satisfaction. The clinical psychologists have found that the majority of people who have addictions, when they've explored their consciousness, their mentality to understand what's going on, they found a correlation between addiction and a lack of love or satisfaction in a person's life. So they found that people who grow up in environments where they do not feel loved, that is the underlying cause of addiction. That is the thing that propels people to look for the satisfaction of love that they're not getting through some kind of negative intoxication, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, even the internet. And therefore I saw this correlation, that when we have humility, then all of the care, attention, and affection that we experience, we feel both that we're not deserving of it, and therefore we feel it's just the unconditional, positive regard, not only of Krishna, but of his associates. And in love, they became incredibly strong, dynamic, happy, powerful devotees. And it was all around this association, this impetus. And then I'll make one other point, then we'll stop for questions. I also saw that because of the association, their tests were different. We talked about the material world being an examination, or Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur saying that. I saw their tests, it completely changed the game. Their tests had a completely different caliber. Because they weren't ashamed of who they were, they also weren't ashamed of their tests, and they weren't ashamed of their performance in the test. They were able to be honest. This is a test I'm facing. How do you deal with it? This is the test that I failed. You know, how would you pass the test? What did I do wrong? So they became simultaneously more and more humble. And at the same time, through their association and through the love that they were imbibing from that association, ultimately from Krishna, while becoming more and more humble, they became more and more blissful and stronger. And I thought, wow, if only everyone in our movement was tuned into this experience. How blissful, how powerful, how authentic, how compassionate we would all be. And this association is the key, because when we have a test but we feel supported, the test becomes easy. When we have a test and we feel alone, even the simplest test becomes or feels like the greatest obstacle. So it was all around association. As I said, I am those devotees that I associated with in the past. And I am becoming those devotees who I am associating with in the present. So I realized that in the pages of these 64 principles by Bhaktisiddhanta, he was giving us an incredible gift. He was giving us literally the gift of not only our consciousness, but also our future, by giving us the gift of the awareness of the importance of who we associate with and how we associate with them, along with the awareness of knowing who may be challenging, who may be in our environment, who may be acting like anchors, holding us back. Not that we have to reject them, but we have to reject the mentality of allowing us to be held back by anyone. So poverty and nivriti, taking the positive association deeply and transforming or changing any negative interactions so that they also become positive. They also become a learning curve. They also become a way by which we may learn the lessons even from those negative associations, imbibe the lessons, but not get brought down by anyone. Anyway, I guess we'll stop there. Tomorrow, because we were going to read 3 different quotes, but I think we'll just stop there today. We may bring that other quote over into another session, maybe tomorrow or the day after, because we have a few sessions. And I'm going to pause and open up for any questions from Gora Hari, and we'll see what we can share over the next however long we have.
Thank you so much, Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu. Oops. Baladev. Switch off this. Okay. Wow. Okay, we are still alive. So I have 2 questions actually that came up. And first of all, thank you so much. It was a really very enlivening lecture. So the first question I have is how to deal with a new bhakta who on one side should learn that it is the best to follow the authorities, and it's not about his or her false ego, versus on the other hand, not to become dependent on the approval of the authority. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a very, very interesting question. So as I said, I was putting together some material, maybe for a future seminar. And I wanted to see what is the understanding, what are some of the approaches in psychology, and how do things work in Krishna consciousness? And a few days ago, Krishna, he allowed me to see something which I thought, this is really interesting, and it's very instructive to what is being asked. So there's a system in psychology called transactional analysis. And it talks about 3 states: the adult state, the child state, and the parent state. And so it's really talking about having ultimately what we call a healthy adult, where we can relate to each other in a very healthy, balanced, equal way, where we don't overreact, we don't underreact. So we basically, we honor ourselves properly and we honor other people properly. And we can understand by symptoms that that healthy adult state would correlate to the state of the mode of goodness. Okay, and we come to goodness en route to transcendence. So it also spoke about the receptive child state. So in our relationships with people who are, let's say, further along the path in Krishna consciousness, by consciousness, I don't just mean externally, but who are actually more advanced. In that relationship, let's say relationship between guru and disciple, the disciple, if he or she has what we call a receptive child state, that doesn't mean they're childish. It doesn't mean they don't function on their own 2 feet, but it means they're receptive in this area to someone who is more advanced than them so that they can learn. Just like if you go to university, you may go to you may go to university and you're an adult, but and the other people who are teaching you, they're adults, but there's still a state of receptivity because you know that you're learning from them. So you're comfortable taking the position of a student. So what's meant to happen is if you have someone who's in a healthy adult state and you have someone who's relating to them as a receptive student for the sake of learning. So in the communication for the sake of learning specifically, then if they're a healthy adult and I'm a receptive student, then the fact that they're a healthy adult means that what they'll do is they won't just keep the relationship like this. Because they're healthy, if they're a proper teacher, a proper adult, a proper guru, then what they're looking for in their disciples is they're trying to make their disciples also like them. So even though it starts like this, by their guidance, it comes like this. Of course, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen sentimentally. It's through maturation. If we follow properly and they guide properly, through maturation, we do come like this. We mature, and then the relationship becomes more and more one of equals. But it's by the process of actual qualification and actual maturation. So one can't do it artificially. So there's two expectations. There's one expectation on those who are junior, and there's one expectation on those who are senior. So the expectation on those who are junior is to really understand that actually, just like when I went to university or college or school, if I can't learn and hear from an authority, how will I grow? Because actually, every single day, everyone is accepting some kind of knowledge from some kind of authority. It's not some new thing that happens in Krishna consciousness. It happens every day. When you go to the doctor, you're seeing someone because you have some health issue. They're making an examination and they're giving some guidance based upon their superior understanding of what is required for us to grow. And to the extent that we take their guidance, to that extent, we become free of the disease. So one of the most powerful things that we need to do, and this is a principle in our entire Krishna consciousness, there are so many things that we do which are completely consistent with what we do in the outside world and what everyone else does. It's just that because we don't understand that, we don't see the link, we're happy to do it in every other sphere of life. And then if we have to do it in Krishna consciousness, it becomes a big issue. It was very interesting. I also saw that when people don't respect their authorities properly, one of the ways that Krishna helps them to understand that this is wrong is he puts the person who does not respect authority, he puts them later on in their life in a position of authority, and then they're disrespected by their juniors. He's so clever. He's so efficient that what we don't do, he'll arrange for us to be on the receiving end of our own improper behavior in order to really, this is what it's like when people have to deal with you. I'm going to show you what it's like by pulling you on the receiving end of your own behavior. Incredible. So someone who's clever, someone who's intelligent will understand that it's always in your best interest to behave properly as a follower, okay? Now, that's one part of the equation, but it's not the full story. The other part is the responsibility of the authorities themselves, okay? Now, I'm gonna share this, but we should be very clear. What the problem we have in material life is everyone's talking about everyone else's responsibilities rather than their own. And that's why the world is in such a mess. The idea is that we let other people act as they will. We can't change them. We can inspire them, but we can't change them. But the first question we need to ask ourselves in life is, am I doing what I'm meant to be doing? So as authorities, we're meant to show love, care, appreciation, and give shelter. It is just like a good parent. As a good parent is giving that love, shelter, appreciation, encouragement, then others will also feel inspired to reciprocate. So that's the full story. And this theme, unfortunately, of pointing out what others are meant to be doing when we're not doing what we're meant to be doing properly. And I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying that the person who asked the question is not doing what they're meant to be doing. I'm talking very generally. We've seen this in the modern world. It's so interesting. The modern world if you look at it through the eyes of Shastra, you can decode the modern world. Krishna often talks about the world and the material world as a place of duality. And that is absolutely true. So for example, you have rights and you have responsibilities. Every single one of us. This is one of the dualities of the modern world, rights and responsibilities. Whenever any of these things are taken out of balance, it leads to dysfunction and leads to real issues in life. So for example, and we see this sometimes, if I'm just talking about my rights, my entitlement, I am entitled to X, Y, and Z. If I'm talking about my rights without also making sure that I'm performing my responsibilities, it leads to an issue. Prabhupada says, first deserve, then desire. That means first do what you're meant to be doing, do it consistently, do it properly. And because you're doing what you're meant to be doing, then these rights become our rightful claim. Why? Because there's a karmic connection between the two. By me taking care of my responsibilities, I actually generate the credits to receive my rights. And what is often happening in the modern world is, without taking care of my own responsibilities, or not without acting properly myself, I'm just demanding that other people should do certain things for me. And so it's like expecting riches without giving in charity, right? It's like expecting loving relationships while being cruel, neglectful, and dismissive of other people. So I want the fruits of such things without planting the positive seeds myself. So there's responsibility on both sides. And the juniors should not point to the seniors and say they're not doing what they're meant to be doing. The first thing for the juniors is, am I following properly? And I'll tell you why. Because the most amazing thing happens. If I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, I've seen this in my own life, by the way. If I'm meant to be doing what I'm meant to be doing, Krishna will even rearrange the environment so that I will eventually align with people who are able to reciprocate with that. It really is that powerful. This is what we mean when we talk about doing our Dharma. And the heartbreaking thing in the modern world is everyone's pointing out what everyone else should be doing. And we don't understand the reason why I don't receive certain things in my own life is because I'm not giving what I'm meant to be giving first. It's so powerful. If I do my job properly, then I will actually inspire others to do what they're meant to be doing properly as well. Right? So that's the point. And one other thing to your question is, one way to not, as I said before, we appreciate the approval or the kind words of others, but over-dependence means that I'm so dependent upon it that I now lose my integrity and I don't do what is right because I just want the round of applause. That's what it means to be overly dependent. And the way that we avoid that is through practice, through understanding that the very love and the appreciation that the living entity is hankering for, that full love and appreciation, that pure ecstatic appreciation, it is there unlimitedly when we act for Krishna's pleasure and for the pleasure of the devotees, meaning when we act to do what is ultimately best for them, not just what's going to make us look good superficially in the eyes of other people. So through good association, we come up to that standard. Through chanting properly, hearing and reading properly, we come to that standard. Through serving with humility, what is the ultimate best for that person? Let me do that, irrespective of whether it gets a round of applause or not. Sometimes we do service and there's no recognition for it. That can be some of the greatest blessings in the life of a devotee. I remember when I first went to Vrindavan, it was 2001. And I remember we went to Kirtan. It was like very, I think it was either very late at night or very early morning. I can't remember which. It was a graveyard shift. We went to Krishna Balaram Mandir and I think there was 4 people there, maybe 5. I believe, who was it? Madhava was there playing the Madanga, and it was Ayendra Prabhu leading the kirtan. And he was just doing, there was hardly anyone there. Hardly anyone there. And it was such a powerful kirtan experience. And as I reflect back on it, I could understand that rather than falling into the trap of just doing whatever's going to get a round of applause, he was doing what Krishna wanted. Right? Not acting for name, fame, distinction, which I said before makes us insecure, even if it goes well. Instead, he had the sense to attune to just trying to please the Lord and his devotees in a deep and spiritual way. He was actually free. That's what I realized. He and those devotees who lived that way, they were actually free. They were not dependent. So that he was able to be loving, but with integrity, based upon the truth, and that freedom and that ecstasy was coming into his life through that connection. So if we want to move in that direction, we have to understand what's at stake and what we stand to gain by living and practicing in that way. So the love is a very simple way to practice this. The love is based upon truth. So it's not that we're not compassionate. It's not that we're not kind. We're all of these things, but we do it in a way that we know is for the ultimate well-being of another person. And we do it according to our position and relationship. So as a leader, for example, we may sometimes have to address things, but we build the relationship first so that when we have to address things, people know, oh, he's so kind, encouraging. He notices how I'm serving. So when he's addressing something, I know that he's addressing it with my own best interests at heart. And when we're junior, because we're all juniors and seniors to someone, then we respect our authorities, because it's really difficult to be a leader. It's really difficult to be some kind of authority, especially in the movement, in this ISKCON movement, especially in a world where people have no respect for authority, whether it's in the secular world or even in our spiritual communities. So that compassion is also important. It's a headache, right? And so if anyone is humble enough, or let's be honest, sometimes crazy enough to take on that burden, just that point, they are worthy of some respect. So let us do what we're meant to be doing properly. Let us be 100% in that space. Let me do what I'm meant to be doing properly. And that will empower my own life, irrespective of how everyone else is behaving. Let me do my duty properly. And let me do that in such a powerful way that it inspires in the environment others to do what they're meant to be doing. That's the ultimate point here also. We want to inspire others to behave properly, and that will help everyone. Okay, thank you for that question.